Good morning. Today I had the great pleasure of talking to Sandy Pttinger from Market Street Mortgage in Colorado. Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we actually get started, most of our listeners like to know where people, how did you end up in Colorado? Were you local? And how did you get into business and start your professional career?
Okay. My family moved to Colorado when I was 5 from Iowa. So I have been here most of my life. My career started because computer electronics had a crash in the late 70s, early 80s, and that is actually the industry that I came from. I got laid off. I tried to get unemployment. I tried to find a job. And I was told that I was one of the most unemployable commodities in the United States.
I love it.
I was a female manager without a college degree. And they said, that's just too bad for you. You will probably be a secretary.
You had the Woolworths.
Pardon me?
Had the Woolworths, right?
Exactly. And I was, in the process, I had decided that I could be a general contractor. And I had a specific house that I was going to build. And I was halfway through it when I was laid off from my job, along with all middle-level management, incidentally, at the company that I worked at. All middle-level management was laid off across the board in one day.
So a lot of people on the street.
Exactly. Well, and at the same time, major companies had laid off thousands of people. In this area, there were HUD repo homes everywhere, and the interest rate, as some of you are probably aware, was up around 17%.
Yeah, it's a Jimmy's day, Jimmy Carter.
Yes, exactly. Well, it had just started to come down. I was building this house, and I was working with a mortgage banker who had been in the business quite a long time. And he said, you know what, there are a lot of people doing refinances. We could use some help. I said, well, they told me I was going to have to be a secretary. So I'll just, start as whatever you've got. And I started as a mortgage loan closer. Then I went to work for a title company as a real estate transaction closer. And then, I discovered that I really, really had fallen for mortgage banking and went and found another job with a mortgage company as a processor closer. And then we had another market crash, and the interest rate went up to about 15%. And they said, well, Sandy, you seem to know everyone in town, so why don't you go be a loan officer, and we won't pay you anymore unless you sell loans. And I said, oh, okay. And I gave it a try, and it was so much fun. And I just went after it. I had to, or I was going to starve. I think starvation is a really good carrot.
Yeah, it's a great motivator, isn't it?
Exactly. And worked all kinds of hours, and that's how I got into it.
Huh. That's interesting, and I know that you've been very successful. You do a little over $3 million a month and did 243 loans last year, so obviously you got a real firm grounding. Most of the people that we interview do not have that kind of background where they get that built-in base of product knowledge and how the process works. I always thought that was a great advantage for people getting into the business. There's an old saying in sales that fundamentally it comes down to two things. You know your product and know how to close.
Right.
And it sounds like you at least got that first part down from the get-go.
Right.
Let me ask you, where is, I know you're in Colorado, but how about describing your market area as it exists for you now?
Okay. The other thing is I've been incredibly lucky to have this particular territory. Longmont has grown since I started originating from about 45,000 people to about 80,000 people. Longmont is the second largest city in Boulder County, Colorado, and Boulder has always been, it's always been a good base as far as educated people because of the university and also because of the lovely area that it's in. It's just lovely. It's also been one of the highest priced areas in the entire state of Colorado, and which is why I ended up moving out of Boulder into Longmont. And when I started originating loans, I was in Longmont. To my great surprise, over 50% of the people that I was doing loans for were moving from Boulder to Longmont. And so ultimately I ended up in an office in Boulder, which was easier for most of my clients. Longmont has a regular growth. It always has. And the growth comes from people moving out of Boulder. People come into this area, they fall in love with Boulder, they want to live in Boulder, and they can't afford it. And so they go 11 miles down the road to Longmont, which is a lovely community, and it's almost Midwestern in its nature. You could probably pick Longmont up and drop it in the middle of Nebraska and no one would notice.
It's flatland or near mountains?
It's flat, but the mountains are, 15 miles from here. It's a half an hour to Rocky Mountain National Park, and it's a very, very nice town. It's the perfect size. So, but it's small. My territory is 80,000 people, and I range then, if you go down I-25 north to south in Colorado, I do loans from the very south end of Colorado all the way to the north end. Because as my clientele has grown, they have moved to other areas, but they've stuck with me because I stay in touch with them.
But that's an extraordinary amount of loans to do for such a small town. It begs the question that whether you own that town or not, business-wise.
At one point, I had a 12% market share in Longmont.
Yourself?
By myself.
Wow.
And I don't any longer. But it's still a large market share. I probably have an 8% market share for Longmont.
Wow.
And the Boulder County area.
Well, let me ask you something. Why don't we get into your business today? How is your business broken up, first off? Is it primarily realtor-generated?
My business is about 60% buyer referrals. Buyers come back to me, so it's repeat business and it's buyer referrals. So it's only 40% realtor referrals at this point. Of course, it began so long ago. I began originating in 1984. That was 100% realtor referrals. I had no other base. And I have built it, and if I had to rely solely on realtors at this point, I'd certainly feel like I was starving to death, because that's a lot of work. So I have a couple of attorneys, a couple of accountants, but it's primarily my former clients, and I do work very hard to stay in touch with them. I send them informative letters 4 to 6 times a year, as often as I can, just giving them information on things like market conditions. One letter in 1998 contained equations for figuring out if a refinance really was going to help you, so that people could just sit down with it and see, should I do this or not? Should I even pick up the phone and call? And it wasn't to generate refinances, it was just to give people information. And it's amazing how with every letter I send out a business card. And I have clients that have saved up my business cards over the years, and they have a stack of 60 in their home. So it does work, and they do give them to friends. Just staying in touch with your clients is the best method of business generation I've ever found.
Well, that begs a question. If we can go a little deeper into that process, and I'd like to talk about realtors a little bit later, but since you started talking about customers, let me ask you, do you spend a lot of face time with your customers when they come in? By that I mean, do you take the full apps? Do you take it over a computer, by hand? How do you establish a relationship? And I'd like for you to direct your comments really to the audience as opposed to me, but how do you establish a relationship, and what is your definition of a relationship with these clients?
Ooh, definition of relationship. Well, to know what they truly need in their loan, you have to know a little bit about them personally. So I do ask them questions. What number house do you think this is for you? What are your plans for it? How long are you planning on being in this area? And believe it or not, people who have never met you before or even seen you will tell you this information, this very personal information over the phone. Things like why they want their child in a specific school district. Maybe they got in trouble at one point in their life. And they'll lead you into it And because they've told you that stuff, if you can relate to them in any manner, something that has happened to you or someone that you know, suddenly there is a relationship because you have something in common. And I do start out my interviews over the phone. I do a telephone pre-qualification. I have a computer link for in-file credit reports. And I'm very, very specific in my questions. I'm not a detail-oriented person, but I absolutely, positively want that pre-qualification to be correct.
Now, when you talk pre-qualification, I just want to parse the words here and split a hair. You're not talking about an actual pre-approval. You're talking about an initial pre-qualification.
Right. This isn't a pre-approval. I try to do all my loan applications in person. And the reason I do that, again, is to further that relationship. People are more comfortable if they know what your office looks like. They've come into your home, essentially. They know who they're dealing with exactly. They know what the pictures on my walls look like. They can see my family on the wall. And they're more comfortable because they have that additional knowledge about you. Once they're comfortable with you, it's very, very hard for them to leave you and go to somewhere else. Even if they're, I have one client that's intensely computer literate, but he would never consider checking rates on the Internet. Never. He knows far too well what's going on here and how things are going to be done, and he would never go anywhere else for his loans. And he's a fairly high-level manager, and he sends everyone that works for him to me. So meeting someone in person and having them just give that bit of yourself, that they can know this much about you, is a very, very big deal for long-term relationships. And I know a lot of loan officers don't believe that, but also giving them that much of your time, all you have to do is do it once, because the next loan app that you do for those people is only going to take 20 minutes. They can have, I schedule 2 hours for loan apps. Most of them only take 1 hour, but I offer them 2 hours. If they need it, they can have it. Regardless of how many questions they have or what information they have, I will give them anything that they want. That's what I'm getting paid to do. And I don't ask borrowers to fill out a loan application. That's cruel. They're not familiar with the form.
Mm-hmm.
That's my job. Bring in your stuff. I'll have it done for you in 15 minutes.
Now, do you do it by hand or do you do it on a laptop? And knowing full well that there's a lot of people that have laptops that still prefer to do it by hand.
Right. I have a computer, but I'm much faster by hand. I write very fast, and I don't type very fast. And in addition, the computer programs for mortgage banking don't seem to be very quick unless you have something phenomenal that I haven't seen yet. But I took loan applications. I really gave it a shot for a year and a half, solely on the computer, and it slowed me down so much. I was working very long hours and keeping people too long in my office, so I do it by hand.
Mm-hmm. Plus, there's a theory, too, that I've articulated in other interviews, that when you do it by hand, there's kind of a symbiotic type relationship where you're looking at them in the eyeball, you're then writing something down, and it seems to create kind of a subconscious bonding by doing that.
Right. The eye contact is exceedingly important, and I know there are a lot of loan officers that are so computer literate that they can sit there and type those things in and be able to have some degree of eye contact. I'm just not one of them. I have one loan officer working for me that takes his loan applications over the phone and inputs them into the computer and then meets with the people to review the loan application, just so that he can have that eye contact. You see what I mean?
Oh, sure. FaceTime's everything.
Exactly. It really is meaningful. But when you think about it, it's truly customer service, that you are giving that face-to-face time with him. You have to get up in the morning and look nice. You have to come to the office and look like a professional, or go to their office, or whatever, and behave as a professional. So that is something that you're giving to them, and it's customer service, and it's the only thing we have. Anybody can give them price, but if you give them the best customer service, they'll stay with you.
Do you take most of your loan apps? You seem to indicate you take them at your office. If that's the case, why do you do that as opposed to in their home or at a realtor's office, understanding there are times when you have to do both? I'm talking about preference here.
Part of it is familiarity. I want them to feel comfortable with me. And if they know where I'm coming from, where my office is and so forth, they can see that we're a viable company. We're in a regular office building. We have a nice office. We have nice furniture. I'm not working out of my car or my basement. So part of that is the presentation and making people feel comfortable with you.
Okay.
Also, it's much faster. If you go to someone's home to do a loan application, the phone's ringing, the dog's barking, the children are, fighting, and it's going to take forever, and it's going to seem like a tedious experience to the buyers. If they come to your office, it's a professional experience, and they're just more comfortable with the whole thing. They have more confidence. And what that does, that increased level of confidence, is it cuts down on the panic calls and the buyer's remorse and the fears and all of the little things that people experience when they're going through home buying or getting a mortgage. Borrowing money is a seriously traumatizing experience for a lot of people. So getting them calm is one of the main things that we try to do.
You're on the mark there. Truth-wise, I can speak for myself that having been a top realtor when I was very young and also being in the mortgage business for many years, I've done 3 home transactions in my life. One when I was real young, one about 20 years ago, and one about a year and a half ago. And in each and every one of them, I turned into a piece of jelly, whether I was griping about points or closing costs or the nervousness of it. And so here I am in the business, and, just I really turned into a massive jelly over it. So I think the listeners out there, the loan officers, should understand that the people who are not familiar with the system, they're even more paralyzed.
I like for the people that work for me to have been home buyers or to be home buyers at some point during the process, because when people call up and they start yelling, they are not. It's not us usually. It's nothing that we did. It's just that they're frightened. And if you know that and can just get them back to base one where they started by remaining calm, you're giving them far better service than if you just get angry, And so I agree. Every home I've bought, I've spent most of the time in, just totally paralyzed myself.
Sure.
So I agree.
Well, once you take the loan app, what happens in your office? What is the process? And I'm going to ask you just to talk a little bit closer to the phone to raise the volume on your end.
Okay. How's that?
It's fine. What exactly do you do once that loan is taken, and the process to make sure it goes smoothly? And what are your goals to get an approval?
Okay. Well. Okay, I haven't had any loans declined in about 7 or 8 years that I didn't know they were going to be declined. In other words, the people came in for a loan application and they needed a declination for one reason or another, or they were so borderline they just wanted to go through the process for me to prove it to them. So, first of all, I'm probably too conservative for most listeners, but I do check everything out. So I have pre-qualified the people. The loan application is 50% filled out when they come in. Once it's completely filled out, and I have copies of all of their documents, standard exhibits, I will lock the loan or not, depending on what they told me, and then put a brief summary of the loan, write it down, a brief summary, and then give it to my processor for her to review. From her review, and that only takes her 20 minutes or so, it goes to our setup person, and then she'll have that set up within a couple of hours. Then we will have the approval probably a half an hour after that for desktop underwriting.
Do you use that a lot?
We use it as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
just as much as we possibly can on every file that we're capable of doing it on, we do. And that's running really only about 50% of our files. We have a lot of government loans that are pretty borderline as far as credit problems. And in addition, we do also a lot of jumbos, and those don't fit well. You know, credit problems and jumbos don't fit well into the DU system, so or LP either, in fact. So
what do you do with those?
Those then, since they've been input into the system, then the setup person is also doing the verifications. Then it wouldn't go directly back to my processor. Then she's going to work on the verification. Then it goes back to my processor, and she will. All this happens in the same day. And then she orders the appraisal and the credit report and everything else. And anything that we need to hold up on, the file will be held. For example, we're not sure if that condo project is FHA approved or if we need to do something further on it. It's a new construction, and we don't know if there's a builder-supplied appraisal or not. And we're just going to hold that appraisal until we get all of our answers on the property, for example. Or if we're not certain of income, we don't have tax returns yet, we don't ever spend the borrower's money unless we're positive that this loan's going to go through. So we hold everything until we're pretty sure it's going to work.
Well, except for possibly a credit report, right?
Yes, and in the case of truly borderline credit, we'll order the full credit report. We don't do tri-merges where we've got really scary credit. We do a full mortgage credit report, and I know not a lot of loan officers are even doing those at all anymore.
Yeah, they'll do merge and purges.
Yeah, but a full mortgage credit report, there is something to be said for it. I don't care how much they cost. Boy, having that person on that other end working to get the credit accurate is a big deal. So, yes, in that case, on the borderline credit, we're working fiercely on the credit report right up front, immediately. That's the biggest priority.
What about keeping in touch with your realtors, not only on the buyer side but the seller side? Do you make an effort to do that?
Oh, absolutely. I will. After I've taken the loan application, I'm sorry, I left that out. I call the listing agent and the selling agent, let them know that I did take the loan application. We have the buyers sign a release authorizing us to call the real estate agents involved and giving them the progress on the loan. We still don't release any financial information, but we do give them the progress. So the first thing I do is let them know that loan application was made, so that portion of the contract requirement has been handled. And then once we get the loan approval, we then call that out, and then we also fax a written loan approval out.
Do you physically, I'm just curious, pick a word here, do you physically call the listing and the selling agent yourself?
Only the first time.
But you do make that call?
Yes, absolutely.
And my point is that, you know, it's kind of a value-added thing where you're bonding once again with the listing and selling agents.
Well, yes, and I do that even on the pre-qualifications. When I have pre-qualified somebody, I get the borrower's permission on the phone to call their agent and let them know, and also to give their agent a letter. And so I call the agent immediately, and then I also call them and let them know when the loan app has been scheduled, and then I let them know when the loan app has been taken. My processor gets to get the warm fuzzies on the loan approval. So when the loan approval comes, she gets to tell everybody about that. And that, I could use that as a sales tool for myself, but she also has an established relationship with everyone. She does the majority of the phone contact after the loan's in process. I just don't have time, and the file isn't in my desk drawer, it's in hers. And so she takes care of everything and runs interference until she reaches a point when she can't handle it, and then I jump in.
I'd like to skip ahead, do something tangential, and that is you indicated earlier in the conversation that you probably send out about 6 letters a year, And I think our listeners out there are going to be very interested in the process that you go through to maintain those contacts. Obviously, you're successful in whatever method you use if you're getting 60% of your business. But I would like to, as well as our listeners, obviously, I think would like to know the details on how you construct your database. Do you use ACT? How do you do it? And then what specifically do you send out after the sale is made, and for how long?
Okay. We eliminate, forever, John, if we can.
Mm-hmm.
The database, I was with a mortgage company previous to Market Street that was one of the last mortgage companies to become computer literate. And they didn't maintain a database of closed loans until 1993. So from 1993 on, I have a list of every single loan that I've closed. And what we needed to do was filter out, some borrowers I did 12 or 14 loans for, and take those out and make sure that the letter got to their home address. So anybody that's still on that list from 1993 forward is getting a letter. The letters don't say, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith." They say, "Dear friends." And
okay, I like that.
Yes, dear friends. And that way, it's one letter. It's not generated on a printer. I come in on Saturday morning. I've got material from all over the place that I draw from, and I create my own letters. I write them myself. And the other loan officers that work for me are welcome to them. They can put their name on them and use them themselves. So I write the letter. I get it all together. I have it proofread twice to make sure that there aren't any horrifying errors in it. And it's short. It's something somebody can read in under 3 minutes. It's 3 or 4 paragraphs that do have a little tidbit of information that somebody can actually use. It always ends with, "Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be your loan officer. I truly appreciate your business." And that's the way it ends, because I do. They know it. They know I appreciate their business. We don't thank these people enough for doing business with us. You can't do that too much.
What do you put in the letter? An example?
Well, I've got one right
I mean,
here.
some people put recipes. I mean, it goes all over the gamut.
No. It's always to do with mortgage banking.
I
That's
see.
my job. I'm your loan officer. The most recent one, which I just mailed, has to do with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates.
Okay.
And how short-term rates relate to long-term rates, and what generally happens, and what you can expect once the short-term rates get high enough. In other words, one paragraph says the recent increases in short-term rates were supposed to have a positive effect on slowing the economic growth and inflation. The primary goal has been to prevent the stock market from getting completely out of hand by seriously slowing that particular growth. When the Federal Reserve Board is thought to have inflation under control, our long-term mortgage rates should start to fall. Okay, so that's one of the... I'm trying to keep people positive. There's a lot of fear and panic going on out there. Just give you some information, a little bit of information. Also, the next paragraph says, in the meantime, we've developed new products. We now have 40-year mortgages. And don't forget, we have 3, 5, and 7-year ARMs that are wonderful. So you see what I mean?
Sure. You're bringing it back in. Mm-hmm.
Right. Here's what's going on. Here's what we have to help you cope with this. Okay? So if there is information in there, and people do appreciate that it's not merely a sales letter. It's a sales letter, but it's not just a sales letter.
I really like the idea of putting "dear friend," and I'll tell you, they've done studies on the use of the word "please" and how that use of that simple word, the amount of business that you can do just with the word "please." I find this kind of analogous to it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they all say "dear friends." I spoke with one lady a few nights ago who had been receiving my letters for 7 years, and the outside of the envelopes are always addressed to the so-and-so family. And I always tell people when they come in for loan application, even if you're by yourself, you're your own family, you will get letters from me that say that they're to such and such a family. I haven't discovered a better way to do that. This woman had been married and divorced twice, and she got her loan from me.
That's good. Took care of that problem.
I know. And people call me, let me know when they have moved, but they maybe don't have a home now, or when we get the letters back. In other words, the post office has been unable to deliver them. We do take those people off our mailing list because they've probably moved out of state.
Sure.
That's how we update our mailing list, and we pull from the loans closed. If I have a mailing that's coming close to the end of the month, like the one that just went out, we actually created the mailing in April. We also pulled the names of all the loans that we have in process, so they could go out too. So everybody gets one of those.
And how many do you send a year?
4 to 6. There's always a Christmas letter, a January letter. I send 2 in the late part of the year. I send 2 to 3 between September and December because people are thinking about other things, and you want to get in their face before spring comes. And so it's just kind of waking them up, and then 1 in January, and then 1 now in spring. So 5 almost always. I've rarely gone less.
And usually within that half-year period, which is kind of interesting. You want to hear a good idea? Which, by extension, we're telling our listeners out there. I once knew a realtor, knew her for many, many years, and the first time I met her was in a casual situation. Somehow she got my card, but it was certainly over 20, 25 years ago. And every Thanksgiving, I would get a Thanksgiving card. And later on, when I got to know her better, it turns out that she did not send Christmas cards out, didn't send any other form of correspondence, but she would send the most elaborate, expensive, and these things were incredibly expensive, Thanksgiving cards. And I've never gotten a Thanksgiving card from anybody except her. And I always thought that that was something totally out of the box, totally different, and she became legendary for it. So, just doing something different.
Right. Well, and at Christmas, all of my realtors, everybody who's given me a loan all year gets presents. Not necessarily candy, toys, stuffed animals, funky ties or socks, just whatever I find that year that sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
And they all get, I don't write thank you cards for each loan because there's too many each month. And 20 might not sound like too many, but when you've got, a pipeline of 8 or 9 million because of all the new construction, 20 closings a month is too many to send thank you cards for each one. So at Christmas, everybody gets a present and a really nice card. And I also teach classes at real estate offices.
Let's talk about that. I like that.
Okay.
Anything that gets business out there. You got to remember, our listeners out there, they're not only listening to your experience, they're also trying to, in essence, pick your brain for any new ideas that will bring them business. And as I tell people, I've never done an interview where somebody didn't have something new or a twist on an old thing. So let's talk about that. I like that.
Okay. Realtors lose control. One of the things I found out early on in the business is that realtors really resent mortgage companies and mortgage bankers of every kind because they lose control from the moment they hand you that buyer. So early on in the business, I thought, these people have no idea how to qualify people, so I'll just teach them. So I created a class that compared FHA, VA, and conventional loans. And it was a huge, long, 4-week, cumbersome thing. But what happened was suddenly I'd be doing business with everybody in that office. I'd have a 4-hour class 1 day a week for 4 weeks. And the brokers liked it so much because it contained so much technical knowledge that I was invited to do this. And suddenly you discover that you had 16 loyal agents out of one office. It was insane. And my business was huge almost immediately because of it. Now, the reality of it is I've cut it down to a grand total of 3 hours. And also, I bring food. I always bring food. That way, if they don't want to listen to me, at least they can eat. I've cut it down to about 3 hours, and that's not as effective. The more time, like we said earlier, the more time you're in front of somebody and in front of their face, if they like you, the better chance you have. The reason I still do classes at real estate offices is because I do have, if you consider 35 to 40% of my business is realtor referred, that's still a huge percentage. And realtors typically change mortgage companies every 7 years, even if they're completely loyal to you. That's just the normal progression of things. And so I've got to be out there to grab that new up-and-coming realtor who's going to be a superstar when they're ready to have a good mortgage maker on their side. And getting in front of that person who may already have some technical knowledge, you're probably not teaching them anything, except that you know what you're doing.
So it really has kind of a dual purpose, not just to teach, but to show them that you know what you're doing.
Well, that's truly the only purpose. The only purpose is to show them, for me, to show them that I know what they're doing. The retention level of the knowledge that I pass over to those realtors, 1 in 50 actually even saves the material. I've watched this. This has been going on. I started doing these seminars in 1985, and nobody has anything that I ever gave them. It's amazing. It goes straight in the trash.
But, of course, that's not the point then, is it?
That's correct.
The point is that they know what you're doing. Well, there's kind of an old saying that in the mortgage business that if you can teach the realtors and the managers, they will be the path to your door, not the other way around. And I say that having been a teacher like you did, and I taught a lot of realtors. I had a very extensive all-day course with a framed diploma and the big handout and everything. It was a little more elaborate. But the point of it is that at some point in the equation, if they know you're good and you can impart knowledge, you'll find just not the realtors, you will find the managers coming to you.
Right. That's absolutely true, and it's worked wonderfully. And the reason I do it every fall. I missed one fall, and my production dropped by $8 million the following year. I never miss it now. I give seminar at least 5 real estate offices every single fall, and it's just amazing. You have no idea how much of your business is composed of the occasional deal until you do something like stop one of your sales things. Just stop one thing and see what happens. But I wasn't a good speaker when I started out in this business. I was a mortgage loan closer. The first closing I did took me 3 hours, and I studied the entire way through it. I wasn't a popular closer. The first seminar I did, and in fact for the first 3 years I had to do them sitting down because I was too nervous to stand up.
But you still did it.
Well, yeah. You do it because it gets you business, and because you're not going to die from it. No matter what you do, no matter how scary it is, you're not going to die from this. And if you keep that in mind, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there, loan officers you would think by nature are extrovert, and for the most part they are. You usually not going to last too long in the business. But there is a different level when it comes to public speaking, and there are a lot of loan officers out there who do get nervous or perceive themselves that they will be nervous. But the fact of the matter is, if you can stick to a couple basic facts and you can practice and practice and practice, there is an old saying in the land business that the best pitch is a canned pitch, but there's a caveat to it, a comma in that sentence. And the caveat is that the people must never know that it's a canned pitch, so that it seems natural. And so for those of you out there, if you can just get a basic 1 or 2 hour course down, and you're good and you can deliver it well, you'll have entree into offices, which, of course, that's kind of the name of the game today. Getting entree is much more difficult, as you know.
Right, right. But they appreciate it. They do, even though they throw everything away.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. What else do you do with respect to realtors to get their business? And by that, I mean things like, do you call on offices on a scheduled time? Do you have social relationships? Just how do you deal with realtors?
Well, the realtors have always been my friends. I made friends with agents from the time I started in this business because we had a common goal. Let's get this thing closed. And it's very easy to become friends with your real estate agents. So as far as social occasions go, my top 3 real estate agents get a very, very expensive $400 dinner each year. So that's, you have to know how much business they're sending me to understand why I would spend that much money.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand perfectly, actually.
One agent gave me $11 million, just one last year. So that dinner...
I would love that. That agent would eat real well with me.
That's right. And so we make sure we do that dinner every single year.
Mm-hmm.
When I only make sales calls when I run out of things to do. I have 4 loan apps today, which is unusual. That's more than I would usually do in a day. But because of this week's schedule, I won't make any sales calls. I probably only make sales calls 7 or 8 times a year, which is not anything I would want to encourage anybody to do. You don't have to have something in your hand, but it helps. As you know, because giving them something that appears to be a gift is always good. I give out mountains of candy, tons and tons of candy. It doesn't matter how strict the diet is. You put a nice piece of chocolate on somebody's desk and they're grateful. And I hand out lollipops with my business cards, and people just love it.
Okay, that's a great idea right there. We used to. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just thought of a tangential story that there was a woman company I used to work. Used to call her the Cookie Woman, and she worked for one of the MI companies, and she used to bring in these chocolate chip cookies with marshmallows. And I have to tell you, there were certain, and I'm not a big sweets eater, but these things were the most intense things that you ever saw. And they must have cost a fortune. And she would bring these things in about twice a year, and everybody remembered her name. She left her cards. It was amazing what these cookies did.
Right, right. And you can put their cookie down on their desk and say, have you heard about the new 40-year loans that we have? Have you heard about our 270-day free lock? Oh, no, I have something here, but first give them a present. Here's your present. Have some candy.
Kind of like a Trojan horse kind of approach.
Well, but see, they want a basis to talk to you, too, because they feel like you've given them something, so they ought to listen to you. And they ought to.
Mm-hmm.
You gave them a present.
And what's interesting about that is that that's all kind of subconscious. When you are nice to people or when you give somebody something, you're right. Subconsciously, they feel, or let's put it this way, they're much more prone to listen to what you have to say. I happen to love your idea of popsicles lollipops with business cards. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather simplistic, very, down to earth, bottom level. But obviously, if it's effective and people listen to you, then that's successful. What do they cost? 5 cents a piece?
If that.
Right, exactly. Oh, you're giving cheap pops. I see.
Well, I buy huge bags from the Mountain Man, so they're good and they're fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry all the flavors around in my purse. So they can, if they're there, I can say, you want some for your kids, or what's your favorite flavor, or whatever.
You know what else I like about that, too, as we're talking? I tell you what I like about that. I like the fact that you're giving them something that is sweet and nice, and there's absolutely no negative connotation.
Right.
That can even be construed with something like that. You could almost have somebody that hates you that's going to come up and smile when you give them a lollipop.
Yeah. On the years when, now I told you that I don't give just candy to my realtors for Christmas, but I give presents. but I also give candy. One year, I just gave presents because I had 9 female realtors tell me that they didn't want any candy because they were on a diet. And those realtors called me and said, "Where's my chocolate?"
Isn't that something? You're a diabetic's nightmare, though, I think.
I myself have hypoglycemia, so I don't eat my presents.
Oh, is that right?
That's right. I just give them away. So it doesn't matter. If they have a sugar problem, they'll take it home and give it to their kids. They still appreciate it.
Hey, let me change the tone a little bit and ask you how you deal, because we're starting to get towards the end of our interview time. How do you deal with managers, office managers today? That's a horrific problem in general, as you know, with affiliated mortgage companies, with the pressure of a lot of loan officers calling on offices, and as you say, there's a built-in resentment, I think, sometimes from managers towards anybody who walks and talks like a loan officer.
Well, okay, I don't have that problem because I'm on the list of loan officers that are allowed.
Oh, I'm sure, but I mean in terms of talking to our audience and how to handle that kind of problem. I
have one loan officer working for me who's very successful, and what he has done is he has targeted 140 agents that he wants to work with in offices that he cannot get into. And what he has done is created an economics letter that he mails out every single month to those 140 agents. It's in an envelope. It's in a hand-addressed envelope. It does say Market Street Mortgage on it, but there is the old thing of perceived value, something you get in an envelope, something you get in a folder, perceived value, and then there's always business cards inside of it. So there's some expense in the cards and so forth, but his business has almost doubled by doing that, mailing things to them. And his ends with, "I give the best service in the whole state of Colorado. I work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." Now, I don't do that, but he does, and it's been immensely successful for him.
What do you mean by economics letter?
Brief information on economic forecasts and rates, and then a little bit about our products. Similar to what the letter that I mail out to people, only more technical because realtors do have more technical knowledge in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's every single month. He never misses one, and his business just booms because of it. So
he's perceived kind of as at some point as kind of an expert on economics and market conditions.
Right, and availability. He's just telling them, "You're going to get the best service on earth from me because I'm available." Yeah,
but they all say that. I find more interest in the economic side of that play than the service side, because, as you know, every loan officer, which of course scares the hell out of realtors, everybody that walks into the door when they're new, they're always saying that, "I'm the best, I'm going to be there 24 hours a day, blah, blah, blah." Everybody's got kind of the same pitch, and one of the reasons that we do these interviews only with the top-level people in our industry, and remember, there's 90,000 loan officers, and we interview maybe 1/10 of 1%. And the reason we do that, the top people, is that they do things that are outside the box, that are different, that have been successful. So when we talk about things like sending letters with an economic twist, or your idea of putting lollipops with business cards, these are the things that get business and get attention over a long period of time.
The other thing is follow-up. As you said, you want to get their attention, but if you don't follow up, if you're not there when you said you're going to be there, if that approval doesn't come through when it was supposed to, if you don't return that call within an hour, you're shot down. They're on to the next loan officer.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping your commitment is far and away the most important thing any loan officer can do. Don't make it if you can't keep it. And that's what he does. See, he really is available.
Right,
he really
exactly.
does do it so that when he gets that first call, he's there.
Yeah. And I think that's the point of once again all the things that you have talked about, and we're out of time, but I think all the things you have talked about relate to that sort of thing of giving a very high service level and doing things outside of the box. Well, look, I want to thank you very much, Sandy, for taking the time to talk to us today. Your points were very on target, very germane, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Well, you have a nice day, Sandy.
Okay, thanks.